The fish was still alive when it spoke to me. Not gasping or thrashing, but calm. Its black eye fixed on mine with an intelligence that made my stomach turn. "Listen carefully," it said in a voice like grinding stones. "They are lying to you about the rules. That was 3 hours ago. Now I stand at the rail of the phantom tide watching the sun sink toward the horizon, and I cannot stop thinking about what that fish told me before I threw it back into the dark water off Cape Disappointment. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Enzo Castellano, and I am 23 years old. 2 months ago, I was managing a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, paying off student loans 1 espresso at a time. Then the shop closed, and I found myself answering a Craigslist ad for commercial fishing work out of a small coastal town called Widow's Bay. The pay was listed at $400 per day, which seemed too good to be true. It was. The bus dropped me at the edge of Widow's Bay on a gray October morning. The town clung to the cliffs like something afraid of falling, its buildings, weathered by salt and wind until they all looked the same shade of exhausted brown. Narrow streets wound between structures that leaned against each other for support. A hand-painted sign near the bus stop read, "Widow's Bay, population 347. I shouldered my backpack and walked toward the harbor. The smell hit me first. Not just fish, but something older. Like the ocean had been rotting here for centuries. Fishing boats crowded the small marina, their hulls scraping against each other with each wave. Most looked barely seaworthy, patched and repainted so many times the original colors were lost beneath layers of desperation. I checked the slip number from the ad. Slip 13. The Phantom Tide waited there, a 45-foot commercial fishing vessel that had definitely seen better days. Its hull was a patchwork of repairs, and rust bloomed around every bolt and seam. But the deck was clean, and someone had recently replaced the rigging. "You must be the new guy." I turned to find a man standing on the dock behind me. He was maybe 35, with the kind of weathered face that comes from years on the water. His hands were wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, and his blue eyes studied me with an intensity that made me want to check if my fly was open. "Enzo Castellano," I said, offering my hand. "I am here about the crew position." He shook it briefly. "Jeremy Pike, first mate." He gestured toward the boat. "Captain wants to meet you before we talk money. Come aboard." I followed him onto the Phantom Tide, taking careful steps on the wet deck. The boat rocked gently beneath my feet, and I had to catch myself against the cabin wall. Jeremy noticed, but did not comment. The wheelhouse was cramped and smelled like diesel and old coffee. A man stood hunched over a chart table, his broad shoulders blocking most of the light from the small window. When he straightened and turned, I saw a face that could have been carved from granite. Late 40s, maybe 50. Gray streaked his dark hair, and a scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. "David Crane," he said. His voice matched his face, hard and unforgiving. "Captain of this vessel. You have any experience?" "Some," I said, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. "I worked on a charter boat in San Diego for 6 months. Mostly tourists wanting to catch marlin." David and Jeremy exchanged a look I could not quite read. "This is not tourist fishing," David said flatly. "Commercial fishing is different. Harder. More dangerous." "I understand that," I replied. "I am a fast learner." David studied me for a long moment, then reached into a drawer beneath the chart table. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to me. "Read this. If you cannot follow these exactly, you might as well get back on that bus right now." I unfolded the paper. It was covered in neat handwriting. At the top, someone had written in red ink, "Rules for survival. Rule 1, never whistle on the boat, not even absent-mindedly. Rule 2, if you see a woman in red standing on the water, look away immediately and count to 100. Rule 3, every crew member must catch at least 1 fish per trip, no exceptions. Rule 4, if something in the water calls your name, do not answer. Tell the captain immediately. Rule 5, the captain must catch his fish last. Never before another crew member. Rule 6, If you catch something that is not a fish, throw it back without speaking to it. I looked up, expecting them to laugh and tell me this was some kind of initiation prank they played on new crew members. Instead, both men watched me with expressions carved from stone. "Is this serious?" I asked. "Dead serious," Jeremy said. "The last guy we hired thought the rules were superstitious nonsense. He lasted 3 trips before." He trailed off, glancing at David. "Before what?" I pressed. "Before the water took him," David finished. "You want the job or not? 400 a day plus a percentage of the catch. We leave at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow." I looked at the rules again. They were insane. Women standing on water. Things that were not fish. But $400 a day was more than I had been making in a week at the coffee shop. My bank account had exactly $237 in it, and my rent was due in 5 days. "I will take it," I said. David nodded once. "Good. Jeremy will show you where we store the gear. Learn it tonight. Tomorrow we will be moving too fast for questions." For the next 2 hours, Jeremy walked me through every inch of the phantom tide. He showed me how to prepare the nets, where the safety equipment was stored, and how to operate the winch system. His explanations were clear and patient, but I noticed how he moved around certain parts of the boat. He never stepped on a dark stain near the port rail. He touched the cabin door 3 times before opening it, and when we passed the helm, he muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. "What happened to the last guy?" I asked as we coiled rope on the aft deck. Jeremy's hands stilled. He did not look at me. "Tyler Matthews, 28 years old, from Seattle. He thought rule number 5 was stupid." "The one about the captain catching his fish last?" "Yeah." Jeremy resumed coiling the rope. On his 3rd trip out, the captain had not caught anything by late afternoon. Tyler had pulled in a big halibut, must have weighed 40 pounds. He offered it to David, said no one would know the difference. "And?" David refused, told Tyler the rule exists for a reason. But Tyler would not listen. He waited until David went into the wheelhouse, then slipped the halibut into the captain's catch bin. Jeremy finished with the rope and straightened, finally meeting my eyes. The water knew. It always knows. Tyler was standing right where you are now when it happened. 1 second he was there, the next. He snapped his fingers. Gone. No splash, no scream. Just gone. We never found his body. A chill ran down my spine despite the afternoon sun. "You are telling me the ocean just took him? Because he broke a rule?" "I am telling you the rules exist for a reason, Enzo. Every single one was learned through someone dying. You follow them exactly, you might live long enough to retire. You ignore them." He let the sentence hang. 2 more crew members arrived as the sun started to set. The first was Max Torres, a stocky man in his early 40s with hands like catchers, mitts and a permanent squint from years of staring at sun on water. He nodded at me but did not offer to shake hands. The second was Taylor Brooks, who I initially thought was a teenager until I got closer and saw the age in his eyes. He was thin, almost gaunt, with nervous energy that kept his hands constantly moving. He looked maybe 25 but moved like someone much older. "New blood," Taylor said, looking me up and down. "You know about the rules?" "I know about them," I said. "I do not understand them." "Understanding does not matter," Max said, his voice like gravel. "Following them does." David emerged from the wheelhouse and gathered us near the stern. "We leave at 5:30 a.m. sharp. Weather looks good for the next 2 days. We will head to the deep grounds past Cape Disappointment." He looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering on me. "Enzo, you stay close to Jeremy tomorrow. Watch what he does. Learn fast." "Yes, sir," I said. "One more thing," David continued. "Before we leave the harbor, you will stand at the bow and make the declaration. Jeremy will teach you the words tonight." After securing the boat, we walked together toward town. Widow's Bay had one main street lined with businesses that all looked like they were barely surviving. A general store, a post office, 2 bars, and a diner that advertised fresh catch daily in faded letters. Jeremy pointed to a 3-story building at the edge of town. Boarding house. Most of the fishing crews stay there. $20 a night or $100 for the week. I paid for 3 nights, figuring I would see how the first trip went before committing to more. My room was on the 2nd floor, small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the harbor. I could see the phantom tide from here, bobbing gently in her slip. I sat on the bed and pulled out the list of rules, reading them, again by the light of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. They made no sense. Women standing on water, not catching fish before the captain, throwing back things that were not fish without speaking to them. But I remembered the absolute conviction in Jeremy's voice when he told me about Tyler. The way David's face had hardened when he mentioned the previous crew member. These men believed the rules kept them alive. I set my alarm for 4:45 a.m. and lay back on the thin mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Somewhere in the building, I could hear other fishermen moving around, preparing for their own early departures. This was my new life, at least for now. I had to make it work. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, I dreamed of dark water and voices calling my name. My alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence at 4:45 a.m. I dressed quickly, layering thermal underwear beneath heavy work clothes. The boarding house was already alive with movement, other fishermen preparing for their day. I grabbed my jacket and headed down to the harbor while stars still dotted the sky. The phantom tide sat exactly where I had left her, but something about her seemed different in the pre-dawn darkness. More substantial somehow, more real. David, Jeremy, and Max were already loading supplies. They moved with practiced efficiency, barely speaking. Taylor arrived a few minutes after me, looking even more haggard than yesterday. "Right on time," Jeremy said as I approached. "Help Max with the bait." I followed Max to where he was organizing containers of cut fish and squid. The smell was overwhelming, but I kept my face neutral as he handed me thick rubber gloves. "Put these on," Max said. "Bait is salted, but you do not want it in any cuts." We worked in silence until David called out from the wheelhouse. "Time to cast off. Enzo, take your position." I walked to the bow of the boat, remembering what Jeremy had told me last night. The water below was black, slapping gently against the hull. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, turning from black to deep blue. "Loud and clear," Jeremy prompted from behind me, so the words carry across the water. I took a deep breath, feeling ridiculous but determined not to mess up my first morning. "We come to fish in peace," I called out, my voice echoing across the quiet harbor. "We take only what we need. We respect the deep." The words felt strange in my mouth, formal and old-fashioned, but as I spoke them, I felt something shift in the air around the boat. Nothing visible, but a change in pressure, like the atmosphere was listening. Jeremy nodded approvingly as I returned to help with the final preparations. David guided the phantom tide out of Widow's Bay under a sky that was gradually transitioning from night to day. The town receded behind us, its buildings growing smaller until they were just dark shapes against the cliffs. The ocean stretched out in all directions, vast and indifferent. For the first 2 hours, I concentrated on learning the equipment and procedures. The work was physically demanding but straightforward. My experience on the charter boat in San Diego provided a basic foundation, though this equipment was heavier and more industrial. Jeremy worked beside me, showing me how to prepare the long lines and check the nets. His instructions were patient but firm. "Do it right the first time," he said. "Out here, mistakes kill you." We were maybe 10 miles from shore when I heard Max start to speak. "Looks like the weather is going to..." Jeremy lunged across the deck with startling speed, clamping his hand over Max's mouth. "Do not," he said firmly. Max's eyes widened in recognition. He nodded quickly and Jeremy removed his hand. "Sorry," Max muttered. "Was not thinking." The mood on the boat changed instantly. Everyone tensed, eyes darting between the sky and the water. I remembered Rule 1 from the list I had been given, though it was not about weather. But clearly there were more unspoken rules, things I had not been told yet. Small waves began building around us, rocking the boat more noticeably. David adjusted our course slightly, his expression grim. No one spoke for several long minutes. Eventually, Jeremy moved closer to me. "That was close," he said quietly. "Never comment on the weather at sea, not even to say it is nice." "That was not in the written rules," I said. "There are dozens of rules," Jeremy replied. "We gave you the 6 most important ones. The others you learn as you go. The waves gradually settled back to their previous rhythm. The tension among the crew eased, though Max kept his eyes down, focusing intently on his work. 3 hours into the trip, David steered us to a spot he deemed promising. The water here was deeper, its color shifting from gray-green to an ominous blue-black. We prepared to cast the first nets. I stood at the rail, helping feed out the heavy netting as Jeremy directed. The ocean spray hit my face, cold and sharp. That was when I heard it. Enzo. The voice came from directly below me, clear despite the sound of the engine and the waves. I froze, looking down into the dark water. Enzo Castellano, it was impossible. The voice sounded like it was coming from just beneath the surface, as if someone was floating there calling up to me. Enzo, I need your help. I leaned forward, trying to see through the murky water. My reflection stared back at me, distorted by the waves. Enzo, please. I am drowning. Jeremy's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto me. Step back from the rail, he said firmly. Now, but the voice sounded so desperate, so human. Enzo, I cannot hold on much longer, please. Jeremy dropped the net and grabbed my shoulder, pulling me away from the rail. At the same time, Max appeared on my other side, physically turning me so I faced the center of the boat instead of the water. Do not look at it, Max said. Do not answer it. Someone is drowning, I protested. I heard them. No, Jeremy said flatly. You did not. You heard something that wants you to think someone is drowning. The voice continued for another minute, growing more frantic, more desperate. It called my name over and over, begging for help. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to help, to do something. Then, as suddenly as it started, the voice stopped. The water where it had been calling from turned briefly, forming a small whirlpool that disappeared after a few seconds. Then the ocean returned to its normal pattern of waves. You heard it call you, Taylor said. It was not a question. I nodded, my heart pounding. It sounded so real. It always does, David said from the wheelhouse. The water knows how to sound human. It knows what will make you look, make you lean over. Newcomers are especially vulnerable. You do not know its tricks yet. What would have happened if I had looked? I asked. You would have gone over, Max said bluntly, and we would not have been able to save you. The water takes what it wants. I stared at the dark ocean, trying to reconcile what I had just experienced with everything I thought I knew about the world. The voice had been so clear, so convincing. Rule 4, Jeremy reminded me. If something in the water calls your name, do not answer. Tell the captain immediately. You did half of it right by not answering, but you need to tell us immediately next time, not lean over to look. Will there be a next time? I asked. Maybe, David said. Maybe not. The water tests everyone differently. We returned to our work, but I noticed how Jeremy positioned himself between me and the open water for the rest of the morning. The others kept a subtle eye on me too, watching to make sure I stayed well back from the rails. By noon, we had brought in a decent haul. Cod, halibut, and several rockfish lay in the ice-packed hold. I had caught 3 fish myself, which Jeremy assured me was good for a first-timer. Remember Rule 3, Jeremy said as we sorted the catch. Every crew member must catch at least 1 fish per trip. That includes you. Why does that matter? I asked. What happens if someone does not catch anything? Jeremy's face darkened. The boat does not leave the fishing grounds until everyone has caught something. And if the day ends without someone catching a fish, he did not finish the sentence. The water claims someone. I finished for him. He nodded grimly, usually the person who failed to catch anything. But sometimes it takes someone else instead. The water is not always fair about it. We cast the nets again in a new location, and this time I was assigned to work with Taylor on the port side. He moved with nervous energy, constantly checking his personal line, rebaiting it every few minutes even when the bait still looked fresh. How long have you been fishing with David? I asked, trying to make conversation. 8 years, Taylor replied without looking up from his line. Started when I was 17. That is young to get into commercial fishing. Did not have much choice, he said. My father fished these waters. He taught me the rules before I could even tie my own shoes. Is he still fishing? Taylor's hands stilled. No, the water took him 6 years ago. He forgot to make the morning declaration one day. We were already 3 miles out when we realized. He finally looked at me, his eyes haunted. The water does not forgive. Before I could respond, I felt a tug on the line I had been tending. Jeremy had given me a smaller rod to practice with, and something had taken the bait. I have got something, I called out. Bring it in slow. Jeremy instructed. Do not jerk the line. I reeled carefully, feeling the weight of whatever I had caught fighting against the pull. It took several minutes to bring it to the surface, and when it finally broke through the waves, I saw it was a large cod, easily 15 pounds. Good catch, Max said approvingly. Bring it aboard. I maneuvered the fish over the rail and lowered it to the deck. As I bent down to unhook it, the cod's thrashing suddenly stopped. It turned one black eye directly toward me. Please do not kill me, it said. The voice was high and clear, like a child's. I jerked back, nearly falling over. I have 3 babies waiting for me, the fish continued. Its mouth moved in perfect sync with the words. They will die without me. Please, I am begging you. I looked around wildly. Jeremy stood nearby, watching me intently but making no move to help. Taylor and Max had both paused in their work, observing. I can show you where the big ones are, the fish said, its voice growing desperate. Schools of tuna worth thousands. Just throw me back and I will guide you to them. My hands trembled as I worked to free it from the hook. The fish kept talking, its offers becoming more elaborate and tempting with each passing second. I know secrets, it said. Things about the deep water that could make you rich. About the ruins down there, the treasures. Just speak to me. Just say yes, I remembered Rule 6. If you catch something that is not a fish, throw it back without speaking to it, but this was a fish. Just a fish that could somehow talk. Your mother is sick, is not she? The fish said, and my blood ran cold. I had not mentioned my mother to anyone on the boat. I can tell you how to cure her. The water knows things. Ancient things. Speak to me, Enzo, just one word. I picked up the fish, my hands shaking, and walked to the rail. The cod thrashed in my grip, its voice rising to a frantic pitch. Wait, you do not understand what you are giving up. The water will reward you if you just acknowledge me. Just say my name. I have a name, Enzo. I am not just a fish. I threw it over the side. It hit the water with a splash and immediately dove deep, disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, I stood at the rail, trying to catch my breath. Then I turned back to the others. Well done, David said from the wheelhouse. I know that was not easy. It knew about my mother, I said, my voice shaking. How could it know that? The water knows everything about us, Jeremy said quietly. Every fear, every hope, every secret. That is why you never speak to it. Once you acknowledge it, once you open that door. He shook his head. Nothing good comes from that. What would have happened if I had spoken to it? I asked. Depends, Max said. Sometimes the water takes you immediately. Sometimes it waits, lets you think you made a good deal, but it always collects eventually, and the price is always higher than you think. Taylor had returned to his work, but I saw his hands were shaking. My father spoke to one, he said quietly. 3 days later, he was gone. We continued fishing through the afternoon. The sun climbed high, then began its slow descent toward the western horizon. The hold was filling with a good catch, and I had personally brought in 5 fish. By all measures, it was a successful day, but I noticed something troubling. David had been fishing the entire time, casting his personal line repeatedly, but his bucket remained empty. Every other crew member had caught multiple fish. David had not caught a single one. I watched as he rebaited his hook for what must have been the 20th time, his movements tense and controlled. His jaw was clenched and a muscle twitched in his cheek. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. The captain must catch his fish last, never before another crew member. But what did last mean? Last of the day? Last before we headed back? We are moving again, David announced from the wheelhouse, his voice tight. There is a better spot 2 miles north. No one questioned the decision. We secured the equipment for the short journey, and David guided us to a new location. The sun was lower now, maybe 2 hours from setting. At the new spot, David immediately cast his line again. Minutes passed, then an hour. The rest of us continued working with the nets, bringing in more fish, but our movements were tense. We all kept glancing at David at his empty bucket. David, Jeremy called out. We have got more than enough for a good haul. We could head back now. Not until I have caught my share, David replied, his voice like steel. You know the rules. Another hour passed. The sun was noticeably lower now, its light turning golden as it approached the horizon. David had changed his bait 4 times, tried different depths, moved to different positions on the boat. Nothing worked. Max approached David with careful steps. Captain, he said quietly, the light will be failing soon. "Then I better catch something quickly," David replied without looking away from the water. I watched Taylor check his own bucket, which contained 7 good-sized fish. He looked at David, then at the empty bucket. His face was pale, his hands shaking again. "Captain," Taylor said, his voice barely audible, "take one of mine." "No," David said immediately. "We are running out of time," Taylor pressed. He reached into his bucket and pulled out a large halibut, easily 20 pounds. "This is a good fish, please." "Taylor," Jeremy warned. "Do not." But Taylor was already walking toward David, the halibut held out in front of him. "You have kept us safe for 8 years, Captain, all of us. Let me do this." David turned to face Taylor fully. Something passed between them, an understanding I could not quite grasp. "You know what you are offering," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Taylor nodded. His hands had stopped shaking. In fact, his whole body had gone still, calm in a way I had not seen before. "I know." "Taylor," Max said, stepping forward. "Think about this." "I have been thinking about it for 6 years," Taylor replied. "Ever since my father. Ever since I understood what really happened that day." He looked at David. "Take the fish, Captain." David stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took the halibut from Taylor's hands. The change was immediate and terrifying. The water around the boat, which had been its normal gray-blue, suddenly shifted to a deep dark green. The surface became glassy smooth despite the constant wind. It was as if someone had poured oil across the ocean, creating an unnaturally still circle around our vessel. A heavy silence fell. Even the constant sounds of wind and waves seemed muffled, distant. Taylor stood at the rail, looking out over the unnatural water. His face was peaceful, accepting. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, he was gone, not fallen, not pulled. Simply gone. One moment he stood there solid and real. The next moment, empty space remained where he had been. His jacket lay on the deck, crumpled and empty. His boots sat neatly side by side as if he had carefully stepped out of them. But Taylor Brooks had vanished completely. "No," Jeremy breathed, lunging forward. Max caught his arm, holding him back. "Do not," Max said, his voice choked. "It is done." I stared at the spot where Taylor had been standing, unable to process what I had just witnessed. My mind refused to accept it. People did not just disappear. They could not just cease to exist between one moment and the next, but Taylor had. The water gradually returned to its normal color and movement. The oppressive silence lifted. The ocean was just ocean again, as if nothing unusual had occurred. David stood motionless, the halibut still in his hands. His face was carved from granite, but I saw moisture in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he walked to the main hold and placed the fish with the rest of the catch. "Secure the equipment," he said finally, his voice rough. "We are heading back." Jeremy and Max moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the boat for the return journey. I joined them, helping to stow gear and tie down equipment, though my hands were shaking. Taylor's jacket still lay on the deck. Max picked it up carefully, folding it with precise movements before setting it aside. He gathered the boots too, placing them next to the jacket like a shrine. As David guided the phantom tide away from the spot where Taylor had disappeared, I found my voice. "He did that on purpose," I said to Jeremy. "He knew what would happen." Jeremy nodded, his jaw tight. "Rule 5 exists for a reason. The captain must catch his fish last. If he returns without catching anything, the water claims everyone on board." Taylor made a choice. 1 life instead of 4. But why did it have to be Taylor? I asked. Why not give David one of our fish? Why did Taylor have to be the one? Because he gave his willingly, Max said quietly. The water respects that in its own way. If David had taken a fish without permission, or if we had tried to slip one into his bucket, it would have taken all of us. This way. He trailed off, unable to finish. This way, Taylor got to choose, Jeremy finished. That matters. More than you might think. We made the journey back to Widow's Bay in heavy silence. The sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed obscene after what we had witnessed. The water reflected those colors back, beautiful and terrible. As we approached the harbor, I saw other fishing boats already docked. Their crews unloading catches or heading to town. Normal activities. An ordinary end to an ordinary day. But nothing about this day had been ordinary. We docked with practiced efficiency, securing the phantom tide to her slip. The harbor master, an old man with a face like weathered leather, approached as we began unloading. "Good catch?" he asked, though his eyes scanned our faces, noting Taylor's absence. "Fair," David answered. "Market should be pleased." The harbor master nodded, made a note on his clipboard. "Taylor? Will not be coming back," David said simply. The old man's expression did not change. He simply made another note and moved on to help with the weigh-in. This was not an unusual occurrence in Widow's Bay. Men went out to sea and sometimes did not return. The specific circumstances might vary, but the result was the same. We unloaded the catch in near silence, working together to transfer our haul to the processing facility. The fish went to market. Life continued. Once the boat was empty and clean, David gathered the three of us near the dock office. "We will take 3 days," he said. "Be ready to go out again on Saturday morning if the weather holds." He reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 envelopes, handing one to each of us. "Day's pay plus your share of the catch." I took mine with a nod, feeling the weight of the cash inside. $400 plus my percentage. Good money. Blood money. "What about Taylor's share?" I asked. "Goes to his sister in Seattle," David answered. "She is the only family he had left." Jeremy picked up his gear. "I will walk with you," he said to me. We left David and Max to finish the final details of securing the boat. The town was coming alive with evening lights as businesses switched on their signs. People moved about, normal life continuing as if Taylor Brooks had not just been erased from existence. "Taylor fished these waters for 8 years, Jeremy said as we walked. He knew what he was doing today. He had been thinking about it, planning for it. "Why?" I asked. "Why would he plan to sacrifice himself?" Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. His father died following these same rules. Taylor saw it happen when he was 17. I think part of him never recovered from that. Maybe he saw today as a way to give meaning to it, a way to choose his own end instead of waiting for the water to take him randomly. We reached the boarding house and stopped outside. I could see other fishermen through the lit windows, men who had returned safely today and would go out again tomorrow. "Taylor never married," Jeremy continued. "No kids, no real connections on land. The water was all he knew. Maybe that made it easier." "Nothing about this is easy," I said. Jeremy looked at me seriously. "You did well today, Enzo. You followed the rules when it counted. The voice, the talking fish, you handled both correctly. That matters." "But Taylor is still dead." "Yes," Jeremy agreed, "and we are alive because of his choice. That is the reality of fishing these waters. Survival requires sacrifice. Sometimes your own, sometimes someone else's. The water always collects its price." He clapped me on the shoulder once. "Get some rest. David will want you back on Saturday if you are still willing." After he left, I climbed the stairs to my room and collapsed on the bed. I pulled out the envelope David had given me and emptied it onto the mattress. $400 in cash plus a slip indicating my percentage of the catch would be available tomorrow at the harbor office. Another $200, maybe more. Good money. More than I could make doing almost anything else. But I kept seeing Taylor's face in those final moments. The calm acceptance. The peace of someone who had decided their path and walked it willingly. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the boarding house around me. Other fishermen preparing for tomorrow, or celebrating surviving today. The same rhythms had been playing out in Widow's Bay for generations. Men going out to sea, men not coming back, life continuing regardless. Outside my window, the harbor lights reflected on the water's surface. Beneath that seemingly peaceful exterior lurked something ancient and powerful. Something that knew our names and enforced its rules without mercy. Taylor had understood that, had accepted it, had chosen to meet it on his own terms. I was not sure I had that kind of courage, but I knew I would be back on the Phantom Tide on Saturday morning. The money was part of it, sure, but something else had hooked me today. A need to understand these rules, to master this dangerous dance with forces I could not fully comprehend. I placed the money in my backpack and lay down fully clothed. Sleep would not come easily tonight. But tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and I needed to be ready. The water was watching. I woke to gray light filtering through salt-stained windows. For a moment I lay still, hoping the previous day had been a nightmare. Then I saw Taylor's folded jacket on the chair where Jeremy had left it, and reality crashed back. It was Thursday, 2 days before we would go out again. I dressed and went downstairs. The boarding house common room was quiet, most fishermen already out or still sleeping. The woman who ran the place, a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Chen, was wiping down tables. "Coffee is in the kitchen," she said without looking up. "Help yourself." I poured a cup and sat by the window, watching the harbor come alive with morning activity. Boats were already heading out, their crews moving with the practiced efficiency of men who did this every day. I wondered how many of them followed rules like ours. How many had lost crew members to the water's hunger? Jeremy found me an hour later. "Thought I would find you here," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. "You eat yet?" I shook my head. "Come on. Diner down the street makes decent pancakes." The diner was warm and crowded, full of fishermen fueling up before their trips or recovering from their shifts. We found a booth in the back and ordered. Jeremy got pancakes and bacon. I ordered eggs and toast, though my appetite was uncertain. "How are you holding up?" Jeremy asked once the waitress left. "I keep seeing it," I admitted. One second he was there, the next he was gone. "How do you get used to that?" "You do not," Jeremy said flatly. "You just learn to keep moving anyway. The water takes people. That is the reality. You either accept it and stay, or you leave." Our food arrived. We ate in silence for a few minutes before Jeremy spoke again. "David wants to meet with you and Max this afternoon, around 2 p.m. at the boat." "Why?" "We need to take on someone new to replace Taylor. David wants the three of us to do the interviewing this time. Make sure whoever we hire understands what they are getting into." The idea of replacing Taylor so quickly felt wrong, but I understood the necessity. The boat needed a full crew to operate safely. "What happens if we cannot find someone?" I asked. "We will," Jeremy said with certainty. "There are always men desperate enough for the money. The question is whether we can find someone who will actually follow the rules." After breakfast, I walked down to the harbor. I was not ready to go back to my room to sit alone with my thoughts. The docks were busy with activity, crews loading supplies and preparing for trips. I watched them work, noting the small rituals and careful movements I had learned to recognize. Near Slip 7, I saw a crew gathered around their captain. They were all touching a small wooden carving mounted on the boat's bow, each man muttering something under his breath. A blessing or a plea, or a bargain with whatever forces governed these waters. At Slip 19, a fisherman was painting symbols on his boat's hull. They looked old, ancient even. Circles and spirals and shapes that hurt to look at too long. Every crew had their own rules, their own protections. And still, men disappeared. I made my way to Slip 13. The phantom tide sat quiet in the gray morning light. No one was aboard, but I climbed on anyway, needing to be close to something familiar. I walked to the spot where Taylor had been standing. His boots and jacket were gone, presumably taken by Jeremy or Max to send to his sister. But the deck looked the same. No mark, no sign that a man had vanished from this exact spot less than 24 hours ago. I knelt down and touched the wooden planks. They were solid, real, worn smooth by years of use. Nothing supernatural about them, just wood and nails and hard work. But I knew better now. The ordinary world was thinner than I had believed. Beneath its surface, ancient forces moved according to rules that predated human understanding. He stood right there. I jumped, spinning around to find Max standing on the dock. I had not heard him approach. "Sorry," Max said, stepping aboard. "Did not mean to startle you." "How long were you there?" I asked. "Just arrived." Max moved to stand beside me, looking down at the deck where Taylor had made his final choice. "I have been fishing with David for 12 years. This is the 4th crew member I have lost. It does not get easier." 4? The number shocked me. Max nodded grimly. The sea is always hungry. Rules help, but they are not foolproof. Sometimes, the water decides it wants someone, and there is nothing you can do about it. Then why do you keep coming back? Max was quiet for a long moment. What else would I do? This is the only life I know. My father fished these waters. His father before him. It is in my blood, I guess. The call of the deep. He looked at me seriously. But you, Enzo, you are young. You have options. You could leave Widow's Bay, go back to Portland, find safer work. No one would blame you. I considered his words. He was right. I could leave. Should leave, probably. Return to normal life where fish did not talk and people did not vanish into still water. But something kept me here. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was pride. A refusal to run from something I did not understand. Or maybe it was something darker. A fascination with the rules and the forces they governed. I will be here Saturday, I said. Max smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. Then you better learn everything you can in the next 2 days. Because the water has tested you once. Next time it will be harder. We spent the next hour going over equipment, Max showing me maintenance procedures and backup systems I would need to know. His teaching style was different from Jeremy's. Where Jeremy was patient and explanatory, Max was blunt and practical. Never trust the weather reports, he said. The water creates its own weather. I have seen perfect clear skies turn to storms in minutes, then back to clear again. No explanation, no warning. He showed me how to properly secure the nets during rough seas. If these come loose, they will drag you overboard faster than you can scream. Triple check every knot. As noon approached, David arrived carrying a folder of paperwork. Interviews at 2 p.m., he confirmed. I have got 3 candidates lined up. Men who have been asking around about crew positions. At exactly 2 p.m., the first candidate arrived. His name was Marcus Donnelly, a tall man in his early 30s with the weathered look of someone who had spent time on the water. He wore work clothes that had seen better days and carried himself with quiet confidence. David, Jeremy, Max, and I sat on the deck, while Marcus stood on the dock. You have experience? David asked. 5 years on crab boats in Alaska, Marcus replied. 2 years on trawlers in the Gulf of Mexico. I know my way around a commercial fishing vessel. Why Widow's Bay? Jeremy asked. Marcus hesitated. Heard the money was good here, and I need a fresh start. What kind of fresh start? Max pressed. The kind where people do not ask too many questions about my past, Marcus said. I have not committed any crimes if that is what you are worried about. Just some bad decisions I would rather leave behind. David pulled out the list of rules and handed it to Marcus. Read this. These are non-negotiable. You follow them exactly or you do not work on my boat. Marcus read through the list, his expression shifting from curious to skeptical, to something like disbelief. He looked up. Is this a joke? No, David said flatly. Women standing on water? Things that are not fish? You expect me to take this seriously? I expect you to follow the rules if you want the job, David replied. $400 a day plus a percentage, but only if you can do exactly what the rules say. Marcus handed the paper back. Thanks, but no thanks. I am not interested in working for crazy people. He turned and walked away without another word. Next, David called out. The second candidate was a younger man, maybe 20 years old, named Peter Shaw. He had virtually no fishing experience but was eager to learn. He read the rules and nodded immediately. I will follow them, Peter said. I need this job. I will do whatever you ask. It is not what we ask, Jeremy said carefully. It is what the water demands. These rules were learned through people dying. Do you understand that? Peter's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, but he nodded. I understand. Tell me rule 4, David said. Peter looked at the paper again. If something in the water calls your name, do not answer. Tell the captain immediately. And if you hear your mother calling for help from the water, David pressed. What do you do? Peter hesitated. I would want to help. Wrong answer, Max said. You do not look. You do not answer. You tell the captain and you keep your eyes on the deck. But if it was really my mother, it would not be, Jeremy interrupted. It would be the water wearing her voice like a mask. And if you lean over to look, you will join her at the bottom of the sea. Peter's face had gone pale. He set the paper down carefully. I do not think I am ready for this, he said quietly. I am sorry for wasting your time. He left more quickly than Marcus had. Last one, David said, checking his watch. Should be here any minute. The third candidate arrived precisely on time. He was a stocky man in his mid-40s with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of years of hard work. He introduced himself as Vincent Carey. I understand you have an opening, Vincent said, his voice steady and calm. Maybe, David replied. Depends on whether you can follow some unusual requirements. He handed Vincent the list of rules. Vincent read through them slowly, his expression thoughtful. When he finished, he looked up at David. These are protection rules, Vincent said, against whatever lives in the deep water. David's eyebrows rose slightly. You have seen this kind of thing before? I fished out of a town called Barrows Point for 6 years, Vincent replied. Up in Washington State near the Canadian border. We had similar rules. Different specifics, but the same basic idea. The water demands respect and obedience. Why did you leave? Jeremy asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. My captain broke the rules. Thought he knew better. The water took the entire crew. I was the only survivor, and only because I was sick that day and stayed on shore. The four of us exchanged glances. This was promising. What were your rules in Barrows Point? Max asked. 7 of them, Vincent said. Never speak the name of the dead while on the water. Never fish on the anniversary of someone's drowning. Always leave the first catch for the water. Things like that. And you followed them? David pressed. Every single one, Vincent confirmed. I watched 2 men die because they did not. I learned my lesson. David stood up. The job pays $400 a day plus a percentage of the catch. We go out at 5:30 a.m. on Saturday. You will room at the boarding house and be available for training tomorrow. Any questions? Just one, Vincent said. The man I'm replacing. What happened to him? David met his eyes steadily. He gave his catch to the captain. The water took him for it. Vincent nodded slowly. Rule 5. I understand. Then welcome to the Phantom Tide, David said, offering his hand. Vincent shook it firmly. Thank you, Captain. I will not let you down. After Vincent left to arrange his accommodation, the 4 of us remained on the boat. He will do, Max said approvingly. He understands what he is getting into. Having experience helps, Jeremy agreed. At least we will not have to convince him the rules are real. David turned to me. Tomorrow you and Jeremy will spend the day training Vincent. Show him the equipment, the procedures, everything he needs to know. Make sure he understands not just what the rules say, but why they matter. Yes, sir, I said. Good. David gathered his paperwork. We lost Taylor, but the work continues. The water does not care about our grief. It just wants what it wants. Our job is to give it what it demands and survive another day. He left us there, walking off the boat with the weight of command visible in every step. He is taking it hard, Jeremy said quietly once David was out of earshot. He and Taylor went back years. This is not the first time David has lost crew, but it never gets easier. How does he do it? I asked. How does he keep going out there knowing what might happen? Because someone has to, Max replied. The fish need to be caught. The town needs the income. And David knows these waters better than anyone. If he stopped fishing, 10 other captains would take his place, and most of them do not know the rules as well as he does. More people would die. Jeremy stood and stretched. Come on, Enzo, let me buy you a drink. I think we have both earned it. We walked to one of the harbor bars, a dimly lit place called The Anchor that smelled like beer and old wood. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with arms like anchor cables, nodded at Jeremy as we entered. Heard about Taylor, she said, setting 2 beers in front of us without asking what we wanted. On the house. Thanks, Marie, Jeremy said. We drank in silence for a while, watching other fishermen come and go. Their conversations were muted, tired. These were men who understood the cost of their profession. Can I ask you something? I said eventually. Sure. Why do you do this? You are smart, capable. You could work anywhere. Why risk your life on these waters? Jeremy swirled his beer, considering the question. My grandfather fished here. He taught me the rules when I was 8 years old. Made me memorize them before he would even let me on his boat. He took a long drink. He died when I was 16. The water took him during a storm. He had followed every rule perfectly, but sometimes the water just decides it wants someone, rules or not. I am sorry, I said. It was a long time ago. Jeremy set his glass down, but I kept fishing. Partly because it is what I know, and partly because I owe it to him, to all the men who have died out there. Someone needs to remember the rules, to pass them on. To keep others alive. That is my job now. We finished our beers and Jeremy ordered 2 more. As the alcohol warmed my blood, I felt some of the tension from the past 2 days ease slightly. You will be okay, Jeremy said. You have got good instincts. You followed the rules when it counted. That is more than a lot of men can say on their first trip. What about you? I asked. Have you ever been tempted to break the rules? Jeremy's face darkened. Once, about 3 years ago. I was engaged to a woman named Sarah. She wanted me to quit fishing, said the money was not worth the risk. We fought about it constantly. He paused, his fingers tight around his glass. One day out on the water, I heard her voice calling me. She sounded terrified, said she had fallen off a tour boat and needed help. But it was not really her, I said. No, she was safe at home in Portland, but the voice sounded exactly right. Every inflection, every detail. I almost looked, almost answered. Max had to physically restrain me. What happened after? I went back to shore and ended the engagement that same night. Told Sarah I could not marry her. Could not put her in a position where the water might use her against me again. He finished his beer in one long swallow. She is married now. Has 2 kids. I see her sometimes when I visit the mainland. She seems happy. Do you regret it? Every day, Jeremy said softly. But it was the right choice. The water remembers everyone we love. It will use them against us without hesitation. Better to keep those connections loose. We left the bar as evening approached. The harbor was settling into its nighttime rhythm. Boats secured, crews either resting or drowning their memories in alcohol. Back at the boarding house, I found Vincent in the common room studying the rules. He had a notebook beside him, writing down additional notes and observations. Getting prepared? I asked, sitting down across from him. Vincent looked up. I am trying to understand the logic behind each rule. In Barrow's Point, our rules had patterns. Certain things attracted attention. Certain behaviors provided protection. I am assuming these rules work similarly. Jeremy and I will train you tomorrow, I said. We will go over everything. Good. Vincent tapped his pen against the notebook. I want to know exactly what I am dealing with before we head out. The water off Barrow's Point was hungry, but it had patterns. You could learn them, work with them. Is it the same here? I thought about my experiences over the past 2 days. The voice calling my name. The fish that spoke. Taylor vanishing into still water. I do not know, I admitted. I have only been out once, but it felt intelligent, like it was testing me, learning about me. That matches what I experienced up north, Vincent said grimly. The water is not just an environment. It is something conscious, something with desires and rules of its own. We follow our rules to align with its expectations. Break them and we become fair game. The way he described it sent chills down my spine, but it also made a terrible kind of sense. Get some rest, Vincent said, closing his notebook. Tomorrow we prepare. And Saturday. He did not finish the sentence. Saturday we would go back out onto those dark waters. And the water would be waiting. I went to my room and lay on the bed, fully clothed again. Through the window I could see the harbor lights reflecting on the black water. Somewhere beneath that surface Taylor was gone, and whatever had taken him was still there, still hungry, still enforcing its ancient rules. 2 more days until we faced it again. I closed my eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. Friday arrived with fog so thick I could barely see the harbor from my window. The air smelled of salt and something else, something ancient and rotting. I dressed quickly and met Jeremy and Vincent at the Phantom Tide at 7:01 a.m. Perfect weather for training, Jeremy said dryly, gesturing at the fog. You cannot see 10 feet in front of you, which means we stay docked and go over equipment. We spent the morning teaching Vincent every detail of the boat's operation. He absorbed information quickly, asking intelligent questions and taking notes in his weathered notebook. His experience showed in how he handled the equipment, checking nets and lines with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. In Barrow's Point, we had a rule about fog, Vincent said as we coiled rope on the aft deck. If the fog came in thick enough that you could not see the shore, you had to stop all work and wait. Moving around during heavy fog attracted attention from below. We have no specific rule about fog here, Jeremy replied, but I have noticed the water gets more active when visibility is low. Like it knows we cannot see what is coming. Has anyone ever tried to document these patterns? Vincent asked. Create a comprehensive guide to the water's behavior? Jeremy shook his head. A professor from the university tried that about 10 years ago. He came to Widow's Bay, interviewed fishermen, recorded stories. He was going to write a book about it. What happened? I asked. He went out on a research boat with a crew who thought they knew the rules. The boat came back empty. All 5 people just gone. The boat was perfectly intact, engine still running, but not a soul on board. Jeremy's expression was grim. After that, people stopped being so willing to share information with outsiders. Vincent absorbed this silently, making another note in his book. By noon, the fog had lifted enough to reveal the gray water beyond the harbor. David arrived carrying supplies for Saturday's trip. "How is our new crew member doing?" David asked. "He is solid," Jeremy reported. "Knows his way around a boat. He understands the rules." David turned to Vincent. "You have any questions before we head out tomorrow?" Vincent hesitated, then asked, "What is the worst thing you have personally witnessed out there, Captain?" David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. 7 years ago, we had a crew member named Paul Hendricks. Good fisherman, followed the rules perfectly. But one day, his 5-year-old daughter fell into the harbor and drowned. Freak accident. She was playing on the dock while her mother was shopping. He paused, staring out at the water. Paul kept fishing. Needed the money for the funeral. 2 weeks after she died, we were out on the grounds and Paul heard her voice. She was singing a song he used to sing to her at bedtime. He knew it was not real. Knew it was the water using his grief against him. But he looked anyway. "What happened?" Vincent asked quietly. He did not go over the rail. Instead, he started walking toward the bow like he was in a trance. We tried to stop him, but he was strong, desperate. He kept saying his daughter needed him, that she was cold and scared and he had to help her. David's jaw tightened. He jumped. We tried to pull him out, threw life preservers, even dove in after him. But the water just took him, pulled him down so fast we never even got close. The 3 of us were silent, absorbing the horror of the story. The water does not just want our bodies, David continued. It wants our pain, our love, our grief. It feeds on emotion. That is why Rule 2 exists in Barrow's Point, I would guess. Never speak the name of the dead while on the water. Because the water remembers them and it will use them against you. Vincent nodded slowly. We lost a man to something similar. His wife had cancer. He was fishing to pay for her treatment. When she died, he kept going out, but you could see it eating him up inside. One day he just stepped off the boat, calm as could be, like he was walking onto solid ground. The water took him before we could react. The water knows our weaknesses, Jeremy said. It has been learning about humans for thousands of years. We are just trying to stay alive long enough to pass the rules on to the next generation. We worked through the afternoon, reviewing procedures and running through emergency scenarios. Vincent proved to be a quick study, and by the time we finished at 5 p.m., I felt confident he would pull his weight on the boat. Last chance to back out, David said to all of us as we prepared to leave. Tomorrow we go into deep water, past Cape Disappointment to the trenches. The water is older there, hungrier. If anyone wants to walk away, now is the time. None of us moved. Good, David said. 5:30 a.m., do not be late. That evening, I tried to call Sarah. I had not spoken to her since leaving Portland, and part of me wanted to hear her voice. To be reminded that a normal world still existed beyond Widow's Bay and its dark waters. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message. Maybe it was better this way. The less connected I was to people on shore, the less the water could use against me. I had dinner at the diner with Vincent and Jeremy. We did not talk about the rules or the water or what tomorrow might bring. Instead, we talked about normal things. Sports, movies, the terrible coffee at the boarding house. For an hour, we were just 3 guys having dinner. Not men preparing to face supernatural forces that defied explanation. But as we walked back through the darkened streets of Widow's Bay, reality reasserted itself. The ocean was a constant presence here, its sound carrying through every street, its smell permeating every building. You could not escape it. It was always there, waiting. Back in my room, I laid out my clothes for the morning. Thermal underwear, work pants, heavy jacket, gloves, the uniform of a commercial fisherman. I placed the list of rules in my jacket pocket, though by now I had memorized every word. At 10 p.m., I tried to sleep. At 11 p.m., I was still staring at the ceiling. At midnight, I finally drifted off into uneasy dreams of dark water and voices calling my name. My alarm shattered the silence at 4:45 a.m. I dressed in the dark, moving on autopilot. Downstairs, I found Vincent already awake, drinking coffee in the common room. Could not sleep? I asked. Not really, he admitted. I keep thinking about Barrow's Point, about the men I lost there. I swore I would never fish those kinds of waters again, and here I am. Why did you come back to it? I asked. You could have found other work. Vincent stared into his coffee. Because running does not change anything. The water is everywhere. Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf of Mexico. It is all connected. All hungry. At least here with David. I am fishing with people who understand what we are facing. We walked to the harbor together in the pre-dawn darkness. The phantom tide waited in her slip, and I felt that same sense of anticipation I had felt on my first morning. But now I understood what that feeling meant. The boat was not just a vessel. It was a barrier between us and forces that wanted us dead. David, Jeremy, and Max were already loading the final supplies. We joined them without speaking. Falling into the rhythm of preparation, Vincent moved with confidence, handling equipment like he had been part of this crew for years. At exactly 5:30 a.m., David called out, "Time to cast off. Enzo, take your position." I walked to the bow, looking out over the dark water. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, turning from black to deep purple. I took a breath and called out clearly, "We come to fish in peace. We take only what we need. We respect the deep." The words echoed across the harbor, and once again I felt that subtle shift in pressure. The water heard. The water acknowledged. David guided us out of Widow's Bay as dawn broke over the ocean. The sky turned orange and pink, beautiful and terrible. We headed west toward deeper water, toward the place David had called the trenches. "How deep is it out there?" Vincent asked Jeremy as we prepared the nets. "Deep enough that they have never found the bottom," Jeremy replied. "Some people say it goes down forever. Others say there are things living in those depths that have never seen sunlight. What do you believe?" Vincent pressed. Jeremy looked out at the water, his expression unreadable. "I believe the rules keep us alive. Everything else is just speculation." We traveled for 3 hours before David slowed the boat. The water here was a different color, almost black, with an oily quality that made my skin crawl. The air felt heavier too, oppressive. "This is it," David announced. "The deep grounds. We will be fishing here for the next 6 hours. Everyone stays alert. The water is more active in these areas." We began casting the nets, working in coordinated pairs. I partnered with Vincent while Jeremy and Max handled the main lines. David stayed in the wheelhouse, monitoring our position and watching the water. The first hour passed without incident. We brought in a decent catch, mostly deep water cod and some halibut. Vincent worked efficiently, handling the fish with practiced ease. Then during our second cast, something changed. The water around the boat began to glow. Not bright, but a subtle bioluminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the waves. I had never seen anything like it. "Everyone stop what you are doing," David called out sharply. "Do not move. Do not speak." We froze. The glowing intensified, creating patterns in the water, circles and spirals that looked almost like writing in some ancient language. A shape moved beneath the surface. Something large, far larger than any fish. It passed directly under the boat, and the phantom tide rocked violently despite the calm seas. "Do not look directly at it," Max whispered. "Keep your eyes on the deck." I wanted to look, desperately wanted to see what was down there. But I kept my gaze fixed on the wooden planks beneath my feet. Beside me, Vincent was doing the same, his jaw clenched tight. The glowing faded gradually, and the water returned to its normal black color. The shape disappeared into the depths. "Back to work," David said after a long moment. Slowly, we resumed fishing, but the mood had changed. Everyone was tense, hyper-aware of every movement in the water around us. "What was that?" Vincent asked quietly. "Something old," Jeremy replied. "Older than the rules, maybe. We see it sometimes in the deep grounds. Best not to think about it too much." As we hauled in the next net, I noticed something strange. One of the fish we caught was completely black, so dark it seemed to absorb light. Its eyes were cloudy and white, and when Max lifted it, the fish felt unnaturally cold even through his gloves. "Throw it back," David called from the wheelhouse. "Do not let it touch your skin." Max tossed it over the rail immediately. The moment it hit the water, the black fish released a cloud of ink that spread across the surface. Within seconds, the ink had dissipated, but I swore I saw shapes forming in it. Faces, maybe, or symbols. "Deep water fish," Max explained, seeing my expression. "They do not belong up here. They are messengers in a way, The water sends them up to remind us where we are. The morning continued with mounting tension. Every sound, every unexpected movement in the water set us on edge. Vincent caught his first fish around 11 a.m., a good-sized rockfish that he added to his bucket without comment. I had caught 3 fish so far. Jeremy had 5. Max had 4. And David's bucket remained empty. I tried not to think about Rule 5. Tried not to remember Taylor standing at this same rail, offering his catch to save us all. But the empty bucket beside the wheelhouse was impossible to ignore. By noon, David had cast his personal line at least 30 times. The rest of us were bringing in fish consistently, but nothing bit David's line. We should move to a different location, Jeremy suggested carefully. No, David said flatly. The fish are here. I can feel them. Another hour passed. The sun reached its zenith and began its slow descent. David's bucket remained stubbornly empty. I saw Vincent glance at his own bucket, which now contained 6 fish. His expression was troubled, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. History was repeating itself. "Captain," Max called out. "We have got more than enough for a good haul. We could head back now." "Not until I have caught my fish," David replied, his voice tight with frustration and something else. Fear, maybe. At 2 p.m., David finally got a bite. We all stopped working, watching as he fought to bring in whatever was on his line. It took 10 minutes of careful work, but eventually a large halibut broke the surface. "Get the net," David called. Jeremy rushed forward with the landing net, scooping the halibut up and bringing it aboard. It was a beautiful fish, easily 30 pounds with silvery scales that caught the afternoon light. David placed it carefully in his bucket, and the relief on his face was palpable. "Good," he said. "Now we can head home." But as we began to secure the equipment for the return journey, the halibut in David's bucket started to change. Its scales, which had been silver, began turning black. The same unnatural black as the deep water fish we had caught earlier. "Captain," Jeremy said urgently. "Look at your fish." David looked down. The halibut's eyes had gone cloudy white. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth that fish should not have. Sharp, pointed, made for tearing flesh. "That is not a fish," Vincent said, his voice shaking. "Rule 6. You have to throw it back." But David was staring at the thing in his bucket with an expression I could not read. Horror, yes, but also recognition. "I caught it," David said slowly. "It came to my line. It is mine." "It is not a fish," I repeated. "The rule says if you catch something that is not a fish, you throw it back without speaking to it." The creature in the bucket opened its mouth wider. A sound came out, not quite a voice, but something approximating human speech. A low grinding noise that formed words. "David, Crane." David took a step back, his face pale. "You forgot something? What is it talking about?" Max demanded, the creature's white eyes fixed on David. "The price for your wife." David's face went from pale to ash gray. His hand started shaking. "What price?" Jeremy asked. "David, what is it talking about?" 10 years ago, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My wife got sick, cancer, stage 4. Doctors gave her 3 months. "David," Max said carefully, "what did you do?" "I made a deal," David said. "Out here in the deep water. I spoke to something that came up from below. It offered to save her, said it would take the cancer away. And what did you promise in return?" Vincent asked, though from his tone he already knew. 10 years, David said. It gave her 10 years of health, and then it would come to collect. The creature in the bucket made a sound like grinding stones. "Time is up. Throw it back," Jeremy shouted. "David, throw it back now!" But David was frozen, staring at the thing that had come to claim its payment. "My wife," he said. "She is at home." "She is safe there, right? It cannot reach her on land?" The creature's mouth twisted into something like a smile. "All ready. There. Waiting." David lunged for the bucket, but the creature dissolved before he could touch it. It simply melted into black water that poured out through the bottom of the bucket, seeping between the deck boards and returning to the ocean. "No!" David grabbed for his radio, frantically calling the harbor master. "Bill, I need you to get to my house. Right now. My wife Sandra, she is in danger. Please, I need..." The radio crackled with static. Then a woman's voice came through, clear and calm. "David, can you hear me?" "Sandra..." David's voice broke. Sandra locked the doors. "Do not go near the water. Do not even look at it. I am coming back right now. The water is so beautiful today. Sandra's voice continued, dreamy and distant. "I think I will go for a swim." "No. Sandra, listen to me. It is calling my name, David. It knows who I am. It wants to meet me." "Sandra, please." The radio went dead. David stood frozen for a moment, then he was moving, running for the wheelhouse. "We are going back now, full speed." The Phantom Tide's engines roared to life and we turned sharply, heading back toward Widow's Bay. David pushed the boat faster than I had ever seen it go, the hull slamming against the waves. "How far out are we?" Vincent asked Jeremy. 3 hours at normal speed, Jeremy replied. "Maybe 2 if David keeps pushing the engines like this." "It does not matter," Max said quietly. "If the water wants her, it already has her." We made the journey in tense silence, the boat screaming across the water. I kept checking my watch. 2:30 p.m., 3:09 p.m., 3:30 p.m., every minute felt like an hour. At 4:15 p.m., Widow's Bay came into view. We could see emergency vehicles along the waterfront, their lights flashing red and blue. David brought us in so fast we nearly crashed into the dock. He was off the boat before we even finished tying up, running toward the crowd gathered at the far end of the harbor. We followed, our footsteps pounding on the wooden planks. The crowd parted for David. I saw his face go slack, saw his knees buckle. Jeremy and Max caught him before he fell. On the dock, covered by a yellow tarp, was a body. A woman's hand extended from beneath the cover, still dripping water onto the weathered wood. She walked into the harbor, someone in the crowd said. Just walked in fully clothed and kept walking until the water was over her head. By the time we got to her, she was just gone, like she had been pulled under. David collapsed, his sobs echoing across the harbor. Jeremy and Max held him, their own faces etched with grief. I stood back with Vincent, both of us shaken by what we had witnessed. This was the price of breaking the rules. Not just death, but the death of those you loved. The water had waited 10 years to collect its debt, patient and merciless. "He should have thrown it back immediately," Vincent said quietly. "The moment it started changing." "Rule 6 exists for a reason." "He was afraid," I replied. "He thought if he did not catch anything, the water would take all of us." "Instead, it took the one person he could not afford to lose," Vincent said. "The water always knows the worst possible price to extract." The harbor master approached us. "You boys part of his crew?" We nodded. "Get him home. He should not be alone tonight. And someone needs to make arrangements." He trailed off, gesturing helplessly at the covered body. Jeremy and Max eventually got David to his feet. The 4 of us walked him away from the dock, away from his wife's body. We took him to the boarding house and sat with him in his room while he stared at nothing, tears running silently down his weathered face. "I thought I could outsmart it," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "I thought if I followed all the other rules perfectly, if I gave it 10 good years of service, maybe it would forget. Maybe it would let her live." "The water never forgets," Max said gently, "and it never lets go of a debt." "She had 3 more months," David continued. "That was what the doctor said, but I could not watch her die in pain. Could not just sit there and do nothing. So I made a deal with something I did not understand." "We all make choices," Jeremy said. "Sometimes there are no good options." "But she lived," David said, fresh tears spilling down his face. "For 10 years, she was healthy, happy. We had 10 years together that we would not have had. Was that wrong? Was I wrong to give her that time?" None of us had an answer. The rules were clear, but life was complicated. David had broken them to save someone he loved. In his position, I was not sure I would have done differently. We stayed with him through the evening and into the night. Other fishermen from Widow's Bay stopped by, offering quiet condolences. The owner of the boarding house brought food that none of us touched. And through it all, David sat in his chair, staring at nothing, lost in memories of 10 borrowed years. At 11:00 p.m., Vincent and I left to get some rest. Jeremy and Max stayed with David, unwilling to leave him alone. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed trying to process everything that had happened. In 3 days, I had seen 2 people die, claimed by forces I barely understood, and I knew with absolute certainty that there would be more deaths to come. The water was always hungry, always watching, always enforcing its ancient rules. I looked at the list of rules in my hand, seeing them with new clarity. They were not just guidelines or superstitions. They were a peace treaty written in blood, an agreement between humanity and something far older and more powerful than we could comprehend. Break the treaty, and you paid the price. Not immediately, maybe. The water was patient, but eventually, it always collected. Tomorrow, we would have decisions to make. Could the phantom tide continue fishing without David? Would he even want to continue after losing his wife? And if he did go back out, could we trust him to follow the rules when he had already proven willing to break them? I did not have answers. All I knew was that I was trapped now, caught between the need for money and the terrible knowledge of what lurked beneath these waters. Outside my window, the harbor lay quiet under a moonless sky, and somewhere in those dark depths, the water waited, patient and hungry, for the next fisherman who would dare to break its rules. I finally lay down, but sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sandra Crane walking into the water, pulled by a voice only she could hear. I saw David's face as he realized what his decade-old deal had cost him. The water always collected its debts, and I had only just begun to understand the true price of fishing these cursed waters.